Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And oh my gosh, we're going to have such a fabulous conversation today. I always know that I should just hit record at the very start because some of our pre-conversations are where we have the most fun. But please join me in welcoming Dr. Jeff Standridge to our program today. Welcome, Dr. Standridge. How are you doing today?
Deb, I am doing great. It's such an honor to be here, and I look forward to spending the hour with you.
Perfect. Well, let me tell folks just a little bit about you, and then we will jump in. So Dr. Jeff Standridge helps organizations and their leaders generate sustained results in the areas of innovation, strategy, profit growth, organizational transformation, and leadership. He works extensively with healthcare organizations, technology companies, and tech-enabled companies across all industries. Formerly a vice president for Acxiom Corporation, Jeff has led established and startup business units in North and South America, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. He serves as managing director for the Conductor, as well as for Innovation Junkie. He is a co-founder and managing partner of Cadron Capital Partners and teaches in the College of Business at the University of Central Arkansas. He is also retired from the U.S. Army, Arkansas Army National Guard. Jeff and his wife, Lori, make their home in Conway, Arkansas. So first and foremost, thank you, sir, for your service. Always love speaking with veterans. And second, when the heck do you sleep?
Interestingly, I actually have a pretty disciplined sleeping life. And so yeah, I'm an early to bed, early to rise kind of person. But yeah, I get my rest most times.
Okay. Well, reading your bio, it is absolutely incredible. But tell us a little bit more about how it is that you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I have people ask me, how did I go from what I did to what I do? And I said, it was really more of an evolution than a revolution.
Okay.
So I actually grew up in Southwest Arkansas. So I'm in Central Arkansas now, just outside of our capital city of Little Rock by about 30 miles, a town called Conway.
Okay.
And I grew up about 2 hours south of here, a town of 1,200 people, 28 people in my graduating class in a public school, not a private school, by the way. And came to the University of Central Arkansas to go to college, and I've been here ever since. And so far, they haven't run me out. It's interesting. I thought I was going to be a finance major and maybe a banker. So I had a second cousin who had an 11th grade education. He sold his pig feed mill to a large conglomerate called Acxiom Corporation, and with the proceeds bought a bank. And he told me to come up there to that college and to get me one of them there finance degrees. And when you do,
and he would hire you.
That's right. He said, you come back down here and he'd teach me how to be a banker. So I kind of thought that's what I would do. And I came to the University of Central Arkansas, interestingly on a music scholarship.
Okay.
But I didn't declare a major my first semester, made the only D I've ever made in my life in intro to finance and economics.
Oh, no.
Well, I don't guess I'm going to major in finance.
Yeah, that bank would go bankrupt.
That's right. Well, so then I thought maybe I would be a music major since I was on a music scholarship. And that's until they figured out I wasn't particularly talented. I just worked hard. And so I said, I'm not going to do that. So I actually worked my way through college from my sophomore year on as an emergency medical technician.
Okay.
Working for a paramedic ambulance service, ultimately became a paramedic and a respiratory therapist. Spent 9 years on the helicopter team at Arkansas Children's Hospital.
Wow.
And ultimately became a professor at the University of Arkansas for medical sciences, teaching in the cardiorespiratory program there. When I went to graduate school, I knew I didn't want to get another clinical degree, so I chose a doctorate in organizational behavior and leadership. And that led me to Acxiom Corporation. So I was studying high performers. What is it that differentiates top performers from average performers? doing that in the healthcare field, and Acxiom wanted to replicate that research for software engineers, database administrators, and moved over there, ended up spending 20 years with Acxiom almost, got into mergers and acquisitions, running their global operations. And about 2013, I decided that I was chair of our local chamber here, a town of about 70,000 people. And I wanted to figure out how we could drive more startup activity here. We had 3 institutions of higher education. We had a very educated workforce, 2 very large technology employers, both of them publicly traded. And so I started that work. And in about 2016, that all came to fruition in what we call the Conductor, which is an entrepreneurial support organization. Started Cadron Capital Partners with partners as well. And so fast forward 8 years, I said I left Acxiom Corporation on my 50th birthday in 2016 to start the Conductor, Cadron Capital Partners, and Innovation Junkie. And so I tell people that I spent the first half of my life making a living. I wanted to spend the second half making more of a difference. And so that's where I am today.
I love it. I love it. And so much in here to dissect, because it obviously helping small businesses is critical. And according to the federal government, and I love this silly stat, 95% of all businesses are small businesses. And of course, they qualify that with such a large amount that, you've got your companies that are just barely squeaking by, competing technically against those that make millions. And then, of course, you are in the state that has the big guy. It is the home of Walmart. And, and of course, then all of the infrastructure that Walmart draws around it, and so and it's really fun because I think a lot of people would never stop to think that Arkansas is this place where so much business is taking place. A lot of people don't even realize that's where Walmart is.
Well, and it goes beyond Walmart, right? So we have Walmart, we have Tyson Foods. Most people they have Tyson Foods in their freezer right now, I suspect. JB Hunt Transportation and Logistics. And then the former Alltel, which was a large wireless carrier that was acquired by Verizon. We now have West Rock Coffee, which is one of the largest coffee producers in the country, both in South Carolina and in Arkansas, kind of where they're located. Acxiom Corporation, which at one time was one of the largest data analytics companies in the country, that's headquartered here in Conway. So lots of business happening in Conway for sure. And you talk about 95% of all businesses or small businesses. Some numbers would even say 99%.
Right.
And it's roughly about 50% of all employees. So I turn on my TV every morning when I come in, and I watch CNBC, and I keep it on to watch the ticker, and but all I'm seeing go across that ticker is the top 1% of companies generally. It's maybe the top 10% of companies, but the vast majority of businesses transacted in those small medium companies.
Right. And it takes so many resources for a business to be successful that I think we tend to forget that, and I think it's one of those things where we only hear about the big businesses, but it is the small businesses that drive the United States and everywhere. I would venture a guess that in virtually every country around the world, it is the small businesses that keep things afloat.
It is. I mean, let's take a look at that for a moment, right? So they're responsible for 85% of all net new job creation, 65% of all job creation. They create a new startup company, creates almost 5 jobs in its first year in business, and they invest 67 cents of every dollar back into their local economies. So it is absolutely critical.
Right.
If you take a look at large companies, take Walmart, right? A few years ago, they announced that they were eliminating 1,100 jobs from their corporate offices. Well, they have to be up 1,101 jobs in order to be net up 1, right? You've got to replace the ones they cut and then be up. Where a startup company creates, 5 jobs in its first year in business, and you multiply that across the number of startups. And so the reality is that large companies, as they get more efficient, are by and large shrinking in terms of headcount, and small startup companies are growing in terms of headcount. So.
Right. And and there's many reasons for that. I want to talk about AI at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's one of those things where we just continually see new businesses form. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's and we obviously saw a lot of that after COVID or
Mm-hmm.
during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
where people were working from home. They might not
Right.
be working. They might have
Right.
lost their jobs.
Yep.
And they thought, hey, I have always wanted to do X,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but they have absolutely no idea what to do to actually
Right.
do X.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun. That's what we talk a lot about here on the program is, there are certainly legal steps you need to do. They shouldn't be writing personal checks to you folks,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
your personal bank accounts. Personal
Mm-hmm.
checks are okay. Your personal bank account, no, not so much. And all of these various things, but I think one of the things is it seems easy to start a business, but it's not. Or actually it's easy to start, but to
Start one.
continue
That's
it
right. That's right.
is the hard part.
Yeah.
And whether it's just oh my gosh, I need to, what am I going to incorporate as? Do I need insurance? Do I need employees?
Mm-hmm.
All of those various things. And so I love that a big part of what you do is you help small businesses with that. So what do you see are some of the big challenges that people face?
Well, so we have two sides of our business. One is what we call Startup Junkie and Conductor. So Startup Junkie's been around for about 15 years, maybe 18. Conductor's been around for about 8. And we're the same company, just two different brands because of the geographies that we serve. And that is what we call funded or sponsored consulting. So our model is that we go secure third-party sources of funding from, large institutions, municipalities, the state of Arkansas, and others. And so everything that we do for startup companies up to about, let's just call it $5 million of annual revenue. It's not a hard number, but kind of that size is free, no costs, no strings attached, right? And then we had companies coming to us that were bigger than that, who needed ongoing consulting types of services.
They were ready to kind of make that next leap.
That's right. And they said, we know we don't qualify, so we'll pay you for it. And so
you went, oh gee.
We created Innovation Junkie to be more of a billable consulting firm because we wanted to protect the business models and the brands of each. And so we work with both. Me coming from a corporate environment, my business partner Jeff Amorine, the other Jeff of the partnership, comes from both startup world and the corporate world as well. So we leverage that to do for-profit consulting, but then we have a team of folks and ourselves who also do this funded support as well. But you talk about the challenges. It is easy to start a business, and it's relatively simple to generate your first dollar of revenue. What's really difficult is to generate profitable revenue and sustainably profitable revenue. And so that's what we run into a lot. There are a lot of people who fall in love with their idea and they go and jump out there and launch their idea and put their life savings behind it, or maybe even max out their credit cards or what have you. And they've never really done the homework to determine, is that idea right for the market, for the community, for the local buyers? Is it right? And so we spend a lot of time talking entrepreneurs through step back from your idea. Don't fall in love with your idea. Don't fall in love with your solution. Fall in love with the business problem you're solving. Fall in love with the audience who experiences the business problem. Go out and talk to those folks and do some qualitative customer discovery to figure out, are you solving a problem that people would pay you to solve? Or is it just an okay idea? And that's one of the biggest. About 35% of all startup failures fail because they create a product or a service that no one wants, or not enough people will buy at the price point required for it to be a profitable ongoing concern. So we spend a lot of time working with entrepreneurs to vet through that process.
Right. And it's amazing when products get through. I mean, I'm still just completely, totally dumbfounded that Pet Rocks made as much money as they did, way back in what would have been the 80s. I mean, who would have thought people would have bought rocks that had faces painted on them?
Yeah.
A lot of people did.
Sure.
But then people went, oh my God, this is really stupid. I'm buying a rock with a face on it. I could go do that myself. But and whatever happened to those people, I'm sure they went on to do other things. But, it is so true what you're saying. We think, ooh, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, since a pet rock, since whatever.
Yeah.
And, people might just go, well, sounds cool, or sounds cool, but somebody else has already done it cheaper, faster, all of those various things.
Or it's not a problem that I would pay to have someone solved. I would just gripe about it, and that's about it. And there are a ton of those out there. I've had numerous people who've come to me and said, I need you to point me to a software developer because I've got this great idea for an app. And I say, you go talk to 50 people whom you think are prime users, and then come back and let me know what you've learned. And in multiple instances, they've come back and said, yeah, I shouldn't. I'm glad you didn't point me to a developer, because I would have spent $10,000, $25,000, $50,000 for no reason. So
and we get invested in these ideas. There are babies. We're thinking, oh my God, this is the greatest thing in the world. And that's one of the things we tell people is you absolutely have to do your research. Unfortunately or fortunately, there's no unique ideas anymore. I don't think so. They're versions of other ideas, and so, research it. What are other people doing? And then how can you do it differently, better? Because each person is going to do it in their own unique way.
Sure.
But, how can you do that? And that's, I think, where, as you said, a lot of people go, no, not really going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And Steve Blank, who's one of the authors that we follow quite a lot, he says, there are no facts inside the building. There are only opinions and assumptions. So get outside and test your opinions and your assumptions. Write down those assumptions, write down those opinions, and then find ways to go out and test them before you put your life savings behind bringing them to fruition. Because my experience is, 60% of the time, we might be correct in our assumptions, which means 40% we are incorrect. And it's that 40% that creates an untenable or an unprofitable situation. And so we've got to mitigate those. And generally, once people go out and do that, the second or third or fourth version of their idea is much better, much more sustainable, much more profitable, et cetera.
And the big guys make mistakes too. I live in Atlanta, which is the home to many, very large corporations. Coca-Cola is one. And I saw that, they launched a new flavor of Coke, and less than 10 months after they launched it, they're pulling it, because it just didn't do what they thought it would do. We all saw the disaster that was New Coke, right? And that was one of those where I believe I was in college when they launched this. And we all remember thinking, but we like it the way it is. Why are you changing it? And of course, that was the problem they found was if I remember right, they made it sweeter because they made it more like their big competitor, Pepsi.
That's right.
People went, no, we like Coke because of that acidic bite and all of that. So then for a while we had classic Coke and we had New Coke, and New Coke never went anywhere. And that they did studies and all sorts of things, but it still was one of those where, we could all live for the rest of our lives on what that cost.
Well, what a lot of people do when they go out and do research is they don't give thought to how do I guard against confirmation bias? How do I craft my questions, my research methodology, my customer discovery process? How do I craft it in a way that doesn't create confirmation bias, number one, and that doesn't that really explores new territory with those folks? And they go out thinking that they've done research, and all they've done is they've used every little potential positive nod as a confirmation of what they already knew. And they're not really, they fall in love with their idea versus falling in love with the business problem and the audience who experiences it. And so that's what we really harp on quite a lot. And so,
well, and confirmation bias is something, where, say you came to me with an idea. I like you, so I'm going to tell you it sounds like it's a great idea.
That's right. Everybody wants to be pleasers unless they're on
right.
Facebook, and then they like to be, contrarians.
Right, right.
So.
Or, hey, you took me to dinner, so I'm going to say I like your idea. I don't want to hurt your feelings, so I'm not going to tell you I don't like your idea. And I think, and there's obviously all sorts of ways around doing things like that. And it does cost money. I mean, let's be honest. Even if you're just taking a bunch of folks to Starbucks, but it is so important to actually make sure your idea is a good idea that people will buy.
Sure.
And it's that twofold thing, right?
Yeah.
Could be a really good idea, but if people won't buy it, doesn't really matter.
That's right. And then other things that we run into in terms of challenges is, not every business founder is versed in the basic fundamentals of finance, economics, and
they've got their good idea. They don't know how to run a business.
Yeah. And so, helping them understand how to read a financial statement, helping them understand that you need a financial statement versus operating out of the quote unquote cash drawer or out of their family, checking account. And so we do a lot of work there. We do a lot of work around leadership and culture building, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit today, and for some of our larger companies particularly, but helping them understand that every business has a culture, whether they believe it or not. And either that culture is perpetuating itself in a negative direction, or it's perpetuating itself in a positive direction, and helping them understand those things.
Right. So let's go ahead and talk about culture, because I think so many folks assume it's not important, doesn't really matter. And I think it's probably one of the most important things. And it's funny, one of the things we've been seeing with millennials, and I love the people who are like, oh, millennials. Well, folks, you all raised them, so they are that way because of us. But we hear this a lot. That generation is looking for far more than just a paycheck. They want to know that the company they work with is making a difference. They want to know that they can have time to go do things that are important to them. I think we're seeing some big shifts where companies like even Amazon are saying, no, we want people to come back into the office. And I think culture truly is very important. But we even think back. I mean, I remember when I was first an employee, thinking about the things that do they celebrate birthdays in the office? If you needed to take time off, were you going to be given a hard time about that? All of those various things play into it, but people don't really recognize that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm in several businesses outside of Cadron Capital Partners where I'm a direct investor here locally, and we hire tons of millennials, and I just don't have the issues that a lot of people talk about with millennials,
because you just have them taken care of. They're not issues.
We try to, right? And so we don't track vacation time, paid time off. Now if someone is away from the office every time something important's happening, we're going to have a conversation.
Right.
Generally people work in the office, but we say, let's go where the work is. And if that means you need to take off a couple hours in an afternoon to go do something, we know that you're probably going to be checking your email at night. And let's look at the holistic experience,
Is the job getting done?
Is the job getting done? Is the job getting done? And so you think about culture, positive culture and negative culture, just culture in generally. But first of all, it's been positively correlated with revenue growth, profitability, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, lower rates of absenteeism, lower rates of healthcare consumption, and weak and negative cultures have been correlated with more employee turnover, more accidents in the organization, et cetera. And so that then begs the question, well, what is culture? And when I ask people about that, you'd be surprised the different answers that I get. And so I say, give me some examples. What is culture? And probably the most common answer I get is, well, it's our core values, our core values, shared values, core values. And I say, well, that's one representation of your culture, and it's generally the most tangible that we can put on the wall.
Right.
But it's also just the norms of behavior that may be written or unwritten. It's how we approach our work.
Mm-hmm.
how we approach our work processes. Are
Mm-hmm.
we a process-oriented company,
Mm-hmm.
or are we kind of loosey-goosey?
Mm-hmm.
It's I tell people, if they really want to put their thumb on what culture is, examine how they feel when they're getting ready to go into work on either a Sunday night or a Monday morning.
Mm-hmm.
That will point to what the culture of
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
organization.
Are you going
Or
ew or
yeah,
yay?
yeah, or juxtapose that
Mm-hmm.
against how they feel on a Friday afternoon when they're
Mm-hmm.
driving home,
Mm-hmm.
and look at the gap between those
Right.
emotions.
Mm-hmm.
That will point to what the
Mm-hmm.
culture is. It's how we talk to people or about people around the
Mm-hmm.
water cooler.
Mm-hmm.
It's how we measure vacation time. It's
Mm-hmm.
the conversations that we have around annual
Mm-hmm.
review. It's the conversations we have between annual reviews.
Mm-hmm.
All of culture
Mm-hmm.
is literally everything
Mm-hmm.
about an organization.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right.
everything.
Right.
And so helping folks understand that, then we have this concept of, okay, well, this is the culture we say we have, which we
Mm-hmm.
call that an espoused culture.
Right.
And
It's
this
the
is
one
the
that's
culture.
carved on the wall.
That's right. And this is the culture that we actually have. That's called our culture in use.
Mm-hmm.
The gap between the
Mm-hmm.
two is very, very important.
Right.
And so we spend a lot of time working with organizations to say, be very overt
Mm-hmm.
about your espoused culture.
Mm-hmm.
Write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Use it to select and hire people. Use it to coach and develop people.
Mm-hmm.
Use it to promote people.
Mm-hmm.
Use it to terminate people.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have people in your organization, no matter how high their performance and
Mm-hmm.
how consistent their performance,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps they're rainmakers on your sales
Mm-hmm.
team, but they regularly and consistently violate one or
Mm-hmm.
more of the core values
Right.
that you put on the
Mm-hmm.
wall, and you don't do anything about it,
Mm-hmm.
they're not core.
Right.
They're lip service,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're lip service.
And
It'd
they're
be
going to
better
cause
not to have them.
problems.
That's
Mm-hmm.
right. It'd be better not to have them on the wall
Mm-hmm.
if you're not willing to step
Mm-hmm.
up to people who blatantly
Right.
violate them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And sometimes it's something as simple as, we value you being in the office, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the things now that a
Sure.
lot of companies are talking about. But then what if, say, your management team still works from home?
Mm-hmm.
Just things like that. And of course, COVID really did change a lot of things. I mean, people went, boom, right? Now all of a sudden they're working all over everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then when you say, hey, you have to come back in the office, well, they might not live in that office. And it's, and again, it comes back to, are they getting the job done?
That's right.
That was one of the things that people complained about the most was, and I think every micromanager in the world, their little heads exploded when everybody went to their homes, right? Because they didn't have them where they could touch them and see what they were doing. But I talked with people who said, we don't trust them. And I would say, are they getting the work done? Well, yes, but. And I said, okay, what's the but? Well, we think they're only working 6 hours a day. Okay.
Well,
are they getting the work done?
They're doing the same. They're doing the same
Right.
thing when they're in their office.
Yeah.
They just look like they're working.
Yeah, they were the chatty Cathys. They were, playing on their computer, on their phone, whatever. Yeah, just because they went out of the office didn't mean that their work ethics changed. But yeah, I kept coming back to: are they getting the work done? Did you trust them when they were in the office? If you didn't, then that's a totally different issue. But yeah, they just wanted to know, what are they doing at 9 a.m.? Does it matter as long as they're getting the work done? Now, that said, if you had required meetings that they needed to be attending, things like that, and they weren't attending those, that's a little bit different. But, and I think that's where a lot of companies adapted, was to say, you can keep whatever hours you're going to keep, as long as you get the job done, but we want you to attend a Monday morning meeting at 9, whether virtually or in person. And, and all of those things. And I think we saw that, like I said, things took some dramatic changes during COVID, and now they're trying to figure out, what do we need to do? Because a big part of culture, whether companies want to recognize it or not, is what happens in the office. You and I were talking college football before the program. We can obviously do that remotely, But when you're in an office, you might actually have the football that you're throwing back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you've got the day where everybody wears their favorite jerseys.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things. It is different when people are in an office. And I think that is really what a lot of people have been struggling with, is how does that play into the culture?
Yeah, no, I agree. And unfortunately, the tech boom in the late 90s and early 2000s, the tech boom is kind of created this weird interpretation of what culture was, and we put ping pong tables and bean bag
Right.
chairs, and okay, that's kind of nice, and but those are what I would call kind of the window dressing of culture. I worked in Amsterdam for a period of time, and there were some ping pong tables and pool tables there in the office, but more importantly, there was a long farmer's table there in the office with benches down the sides, and actually there were a couple of them. And every day, the local deli would bring by a couple of sandwich trays and just set them on the farmer's table. And so when it came time for lunch, people would go and they would make it. Very seldom did they go out for lunch. They would make themselves a cold cut sandwich, and they might play ping pong or pool. They might read while they're, but they would sit down. It'd be like a family lunch almost every day. And this was back in the early 2000s. In the late 90s, I worked for a company called Acxiom Corporation, where I started working for the company, that in the early 90s started a work from home policy. And guess what? There were some stipulations with being able to work from home. Number one, you had to have a performance track record. You couldn't be on a performance plan or whatever. But you had to apply and request to be a work from home employee. And oh, by the way, some of them lived 3 minutes from the office, but they wanted to work from home. Right. But you had to apply and be accepted to the work from home program. You had to sign a contract that you had a designated workspace with an ergonomic chair, with your own computer and printer set up, and et cetera. You had to have a stable dial-in capability. It was before Wi-Fi. You had to commit that you would not be keeping your children during the workday. You would even if they were in the home, you had someone who was designated as a babysitter.
You were not their caregiver. I mean,
exactly
obviously an emergency is different, but
of course.
You're not feeding them lunch.
And probably most importantly is your work from home privilege could be rescinded based upon low performance, based upon if you dropped below the threshold of what was expected of you. And it was a wildly successful policy in the 90s. And so, we like to think that work from home and remote work has just been around since COVID, and it's been around for decades.
Right. Oh, yeah. And it was one of those where when you set up the parameters and the expectations, I mean, that's the whole thing, is telling people, here is what we expect from you. And I think that's why people kind of hit the panic button with COVID, because they were in the office on Friday and they were home on Monday. I mean, with no preparation. I talked to people months into the lockdowns, and they still didn't have a desk chair, and they were at their kitchen table, and how many companies actually, had the ability to say, okay, everybody's got a laptop or, whatever. And, and they really, I mean, like I said, nobody had the chance to prepare. I mean, we had a couple of days, maybe a little bit more than that, where the rumblings were there, and people who were paying attention were going, we could have a problem. We might need to shut down. But everybody went, oh, that's not going to happen. And then, of course, when we shut down, we were told 2 weeks. Right. Remember? And we all went, no, they're not going to go to this much effort for 2 weeks. And, for many companies, it was, obviously permanent, but for many others, it was many months. So nobody had any of those expectations set up of, you will have that designated space. I interviewed a gentleman on this podcast where, maybe the week after COVID started, and he didn't have a dedicated office. So he's at his kitchen table. And, and it was so funny because behind him literally was his kitchen. And, we're on Zoom, so he sees what I see. Here comes his teenage son in the middle of our podcast, very quietly made his lunch. I mean, that kid was not a distraction, aside from the fact that we were watching him go back and forth. Now, kid knew he was on camera because when he turns with his sandwich, he waves,
That's right.
And so, but yeah, we didn't have any of that set up.
Yeah.
And so that took a little bit to get that. But when people did it, then they realized they really liked it. But there are also so many that missed that human interaction.
Sure.
And I think that was probably the biggest thing, was they miss seeing their colleagues and their friends every day in person.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And I was one of those folks who missed seeing my people, right? And so it takes a village, right? There are some that do, there are some that don't.
Right.
There's some that they'll get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and they'll start work, and they may not shut it down till 6 o'clock in the evening.
Right.
And that's just, they love their work, and they are those, some of those programmers and engineers and some, database administrators and what have you. When we work with organizations, particularly larger organizations, we do this work with startups as well. But when we work with larger organizations on the Innovation Junkie side, we take them through what we call a strategic growth diagnostic. Everything that we do is geared around helping organizations create sustained strategic growth. Sometimes that requires some innovation to be able to challenge the status quo. Sometimes it requires them using data and technology to their best advantage. But we use a Growth DX. Incidentally, you can go to growthdx.ai to check out the growth. It's a strategic growth diagnostic. And basically the leadership team of every organization we work with will complete that Growth DX, and they'll assess the company on about 75 best practices. How is the company doing against these best practices? And those best practices really revolve around 7 different diagnostic domains. The first of which is revenue velocity, which is sales, marketing, and messaging. The next one is around leadership effectiveness, which is the degree to which your leaders are effective in leading the organization. Organizational effectiveness, the degree to which you have a plan to achieve sustained growth. Operational effectiveness, how good you are at delivering to your customers with your processes and internal processes and what have you. Innovation readiness, the degree to which you actually have a process to challenge the status quo and make things better. Digital readiness, using the data and technologies available to you. And then finally, financial disciplines, the degree to which you're actually looking at the financials of the company. So those 7 diagnostic domains, they inform the creation of a strategic growth plan. And we actually build a system around that plan we call our strategic growth system. And as we're working with companies to actually help them implement their strategic growth plan and execute their strategic growth system, we begin to observe and the degree to which their culture is impacting their success in that regard. And that's what led us to actually articulate what we call the culture of excellence, the 6 major elements that we observe in terms of whether a company's being successful. So I'd love to talk about those.
Yes, what are those 6 elements?
Yeah. So the first of which is, in fact, strong leadership.
Okay.
Leaders
it's not a title, folks.
That's
it's
exactly
not
right.
Manager, president, CEO. Sometimes the leader is the person that you're not expecting to be the leader.
That's exactly right. I used to have young people who would come to me when I was a corporate executive, and they would say, "Hey, I just wanted to come and pick your brain and maybe a little bit of mentoring." And I'd say, "Okay, well, what can I help you with?" "Well, I want to be a leader." And I was like, "Okay, all right, we'll go be one." And they were like, "No. I mean,
I want to learn how."
Like a leader like you. I want to be, a group leader, because we had group leader, division leader, business unit leader, et cetera. And I would say, "Well, then go be one." No, you don't understand. I said, "No, I understand. You want the title."
Yes.
And what I'm telling you is go be a leader and be a leader consistently. And over time, that will get recognized. And eventually you might get invited to actually have a title, but go be a leader.
Right.
They say, if you think you're leading, look behind you. And if no one's following, then perhaps
you're not leading.
You're just taking a walk. Right. But so strong leadership. And this is inclusive of those individual contributors of the company, but it's also inclusive of the people who have the titles.
Right.
Are they living and embodying the example as set forth in our core values? Do they live according to the espoused culture? Do they provide good direction and feedback, et cetera? So strong leadership is kind of number 1. Number 2 is clarity and focus.
Mhm.
So strong leaders generate clarity and focus in the organization. This
Right.
is where we're going. This is how we're going to get there. This is how this unit contributes to that. This is how these people in that unit contribute to the success. So everyone understands not only where the organization is going, but how their individual contribution actually affects that. And so those are the first two elements: strong leadership that drives clarity and focus throughout the organization.
Right. So what's number 3?
The next one is engaged and committed teammates.
Ah.
So people are engaged when they know where the company's going and how they contribute to that success. Employee turnover is when people quit and leave. Employee disengagement is when they quit and stay.
Right. Which is far more destructive.
Far more destructive. And they say that disengaged employees generally create about 35% more expense than their fully loaded annual salary. So if you've got $100,000 employee who's disengaged or slightly disengaged, they're costing you about 135 grand fully loaded, right? The next one is, or the fourth element is empowering communication. So think about that for a moment. The definition of empower literally means to make someone stronger and more confident in dealing with the circumstances they're facing. That's what you do when you empower someone.
Right.
You make them stronger and more confident. You might give them encouragement. You might give them tools. You might give them a little bit of decision-making authority, but you do something that makes them stronger and more confident in dealing with the circumstances they're facing. Well, if I have strong leadership who embody the culture, if I have clarity and focus about where the organization's going and how I contribute to that, if my teammates feel the same way and they're engaged in the organization as well, then I'm going to feel empowered to be successful in doing whatever it is I need to do. Now, that doesn't mean that leaders can't have tough conversations with someone, because we're big boys and girls here. Occasionally, we have to have tough conversations, but we don't stop at just having the reprimand or the tough conversation. We then transition into, okay, how can we take this and help someone be more confident in dealing with their circumstances? The the fifth element is 100% accountability. So think about that for a moment. I like to talk about—
Not my fault. I didn't do it.
And oh, by the way, I may have dozens of really qualified reasons why I couldn't do this or that. But here's what 100% accountability does. Let's say I have a commitment to you to deliver a piece of research to you at noon on Thursday. And something happens on Tuesday. Part of my business swarms on me. I have a client situation. I have whatever. Lots of good, valid reasons why I can't do what I said I'm going to do to you on Thursday. Anything other than 100% accountability will just let Thursday go by, and I pray and hope to God that you don't ask me about it, right? But 100% accountability says at the very first moment I realize I'm at risk at meeting my commitment to you, I call you and say, Deb, is noon on Thursday a drop dead deadline for you? And you might say, no, I've had some crazy things happen this week. I'm not going to look at it until Monday. Okay, no problem. Or you might say, yeah, not only is it a drop dead, I've got a client meeting at 1 and I've got some travel time, so it'd be better if you could get it to me by 11 or 11:30. Well, at that moment, I've got to come clean with you and say, look, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble, which is you're in trouble. And so help me reprioritize what I've got going on so that I can meet my commitment to you. That's what 100%. It doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to change an expectation. It says at the very first possible moment you realize that you're at risk in meeting a commitment, you raise your hand, you raise the flag, and you have a conversation. So that then brings us to the question of, well, then 100% accountability kind of sounds like integrity. You know, if you think about, I ask people, what's the definition of integrity? And they say, generally the response I get is when you do the right thing, even though no one would know the difference. And I say, well, okay, that's a great, cute definition. But when I was in the medical field, we used to talk about the bone or the skin maintaining its integrity, or whether its integrity was broken or whether it's intact. If a bone is broken, it's lost its integrity.
Right. It is not going to hold up and do whatever it's supposed to be doing.
That's right. If there's a crack in a bridge, which we've seen before, then it has lost its integrity, its structural integrity. Integrity To integrate something
Mhm.
literally means to take multiple parts and bring them together into
Mhm.
one whole part.
Mhm.
To disintegrate something is to take one whole part
Yeah,
and to
mhm.
break it together,
Mhm.
break it apart into multiple parts. So the word integrity at its core means whole.
Mm.
It means
Mhm.
consistency.
Mhm.
It means consistency between deeds and words. My
Mhm.
deeds match my words
Mhm.
match my deeds. So 100% accountability means my deeds match my words. It
Mhm.
means whole. It means consistent. It
Mhm.
means dependable.
Mhm.
And so the word integrity and accountability are kind of the same
Mhm.
word,
Right.
right? At least the same concept.
Mhm.
And then finally, the last one is organizational agility.
Mm.
I follow a number of great management thinkers like Peter Drucker, who
Mhm.
says culture eats strategy for breakfast,
Mhm.
right? You can have the best plan, but if you don't have a good
Mhm.
culture, it'll consume it.
Mhm.
Another great management thinker that relates to organizational agility is the great guru Mike Tyson,
Mhm.
who said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth,
Mhm.
right? And organizations get punched in the mouth and people get punched in the
Mhm.
mouth. Agile and resilient organizations are filled with agile and resilient people.
Mhm.
And so we help our people develop mental toughness
Mhm.
and mental resilience. We help them become adaptable
Mhm.
and agile in uncertain or changing
Mhm.
circumstances. And we also put processes in place to make our organization
Mhm.
agile as
Mhm.
well. We get knocked down 10 times, we get up 11,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And so those things, strong leadership, clarity and focus, engaged and committed teammates, empowering
Mhm.
communication, 100% accountability, and organizational
Mhm.
agility. Those are the 6 elements
Mhm.
that we've observed contribute to the culture of
Mhm.
excellence, which contributes to sustained
Mhm.
strategic growth within organizations.
Right. I'm curious, which companies do you think really embody that? Who are the bright, shining examples of, small companies, maybe it's a restaurant
Mhm.
or, somebody that is, one of the very small percentage of the very large organizations. Who do you think are the best at it?
We're working with a company right now that's about a 35 to $40 million company.
Mm-hmm.
They were founder led up until
Mm-hmm.
about 3 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and there were 3 founders, and one was the CEO, one was more of the chief science
Mm-hmm.
officer, and one was the more of the sales and marketing kind of
Mm-hmm.
leader. And their CEO passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and the other 2 founders kind of became co-CEOs. And
Mm-hmm.
you can think about just the nature of a sales guy versus a science guy
Right.
is antithetical, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so while they continued growing as a
Mm-hmm.
company, there were some cultural
Mm-hmm.
challenges and some
Mm-hmm.
planning challenges
Mm-hmm.
and what have you. And I would have to say that despite all of those things, they've recently hired a new CEO. They've
Mm-hmm.
installed a new leadership team
Mm-hmm.
from within the organization, and they're very remote
Mm-hmm.
workers. So they've
Mm-hmm.
got a couple of offices, but very few people are in those offices.
Mm-hmm.
So they're distributed around the country. And I would say they're probably one of the more organizationally agile
Mm-hmm.
companies that I've worked with. And
Mm-hmm.
it's been real pleasure watching them really rally around
Mm-hmm.
creating a good quality
Mm-hmm.
strategic growth plan, reviewing the results of the growth DX and installing strong leadership,
Mm-hmm.
re-articulating their core values and reaffirming
Mm-hmm.
those core values. And so that's one example of a company,
Mm-hmm.
despite drastic
Mm-hmm.
circumstances, losing the CEO
Mm-hmm.
and having to reorganize. That is probably one of the most agile. They're a real
Mm-hmm.
shining star.
Right. And they could have easily just have completely shut down.
Could have.
When
Absolutely.
you lose, especially when the CEO was a founder,
Mhm.
well, a lot of times everybody kind of flounders around for a while and then they're lost. The other tricky thing is when you bring in a new CEO because they have their own idea
Mhm.
of culture, whatever it is, and we've probably all been in circumstances like that where maybe it's not a new CEO, but maybe it's a new manager, all of those
Sure.
things, and they're going to do it their way.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's always where the biggest challenge is is okay, maybe their way is better, maybe it's not. I mean, you'd hope that there was a reason they were brought in to do it, but sometimes that's where the biggest sticking point is like, no. And I worked for a very large company that did that. We had a really strong internal culture, and some of it I thought was a little frou-frou, like we all went off and had to do the fall back into the crowd catch. I didn't like that, and I'm sorry, falling into a crowd, that to me does not mean that they're going to have my back when we've got a business problem.
For sure.
And I was always thinking, what if that person sneezes and they just miss me, right? But we also had the culture there where if that we yes, we celebrated successes, all of those things, but it really was very much a family culture. And we got a new CEO that was all business, and that worked for about 6 months, and then the mutiny started.
Here's where I think a lot of organizations go wrong. Well, first of all, let me preface this. So back in the 80s and 90s, culture was something that just the HR department talked about.
Right. And you read the book about Lee Iacocca.
Yeah. Right? Leaders said, yeah, that HR handles that for us. Right. Well, just the stats that I read that culture has been positive, strong cultures have been positively correlated with just about every measure of business performance. Right. And so now culture's being talked about in the C-suite. And so it's rendered a lot of those frou-frou, fluffy kinds of gimmicks, just they don't work. They don't work. The falling back in the crowd, they don't work. Right. But where a lot of organizations go wrong, in my opinion, is they don't interview and select for culture, for culture fit, even up to the CEO. Once you determine that and it's another reason why you have to have a really strong espoused culture. You have to write it down. You have to train people on it. You have to have interview questions that assess for it and what have you. Because, once you've determined that there's a cultural fit, and I apologize if you hear the ambulance running in front of my office there.
Oh, dear.
You didn't hear it? Oh, well, good. I'm glad to know that because I almost couldn't hear myself. But if you determine that they are a skills match for the organization, they've got the skills and experience, then it is beholden upon you as a leader within the organization or a board member, if you're hiring the CEO, to do an assessment for cultural fit.
Right. And that's not the Myers-Briggs and all of those various tests.
No, it's not. It might be a small piece of it, but no. It's actually asking questions, for instance, around the culture, around the, let's say you have core values of do the right thing. That's one of our core values, right?
What does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, no, what I would say is I would ask them a behavioral question that says something along the lines of, tell me about a time when you were being pressed to deliver results and you were even being told to do it in a particular way and you didn't feel comfortable with that because you felt it was not the right thing for the organization, or maybe it had ethical implications. Tell me about the situation and tell me what you did, what you thought, what you felt, what you said, and what was the outcome. Because if it's going to, unless they've been through black ops training, covert operations training, it's going to be very difficult for them to tell me what they think I want to hear and lie at the same time, right? And so just recount a situation. And so therefore, I'm going to get to assess how they respond against what we've defined as the core elements of do the right thing. And we get to assess whether or not they're a cultural fit.
Right.
Jack Welch at GE said a few years ago, if you've got someone who's performing well within an organization, first of all, if you've got someone who's struggling to perform, but they're a cultural fit for the organization, you probably just have the wrong combination of job responsibilities.
Maybe they need more training or something.
That's right.
They're in the wrong department, whatever.
That's right. So move them around, help them fit, because getting a good cultural fit is difficult. If you have someone who's a rainmaker, they're the best performer in the world, but they're a cultural mismatch, you're going to have to fire them because you can't train that in people.
Right.
And so selecting for culture is as important for the CEO as it is for the project manager, the software manager, the individual contributor down in the organization.
Right. And it's every level. The people in the mailroom are just as important as the people in the C-level
exactly right.
suites. And sometimes they're actually more important. I remember, when I did work in big corporate America, our CEO once, every couple of weeks would go down to the mailroom and he would just sit and he would chat. And, and the guys loved it. They just thought that was great fun. But the reason was the CEO knew that the guys in the mailroom had the most contact with every other person in that company. Because they had the ear of the support staff, the assistants, all of those. They knew what was going on far better than what the CEO up in their little ivory tower knew. And and I remember people saying, well, that's the stupidest thing in the world. They're just mailroom employees. And I'm like, yeah, but they know every single thing that's going on in this company. And it was very interesting that he did that, because he really did get a lot of very important information by talking with those folks.
For sure. Absolutely. The whole concept of management by walking around, I still think is alive and well, and leaders who don't do it, who come in, go into their office, close the door, or spend their entire time on the road. I'm a big fan of town halls. I'm a big fan of skip level meetings. I'm a big fan of ways for CEOs and other senior executives to keep their thumb on the pulse, because culture really starts and stops with them.
Right. And a lot of it, like you said, is just that observation, and some of it really is just silly things like, what does somebody's office space look like? Have they taken time to personalize it? Now, there's obviously people who get a little carried away with that, but, is because they're spending a good portion of their time there. Have they done anything to make it seem a little bit more homey? Now, there are some that's just not what they're going to do. I mean, are they meeting at the coffee machine and kind of chit chatting? Are they having the communal lunches? All of those things, and I don't know if it's better or worse when you have people in kind of a bullpen type of area. The last big office I worked in, we had is a bullpen, but you had, walls that were, so you kind of had to peer over. But you still, you could kind of hear those things going on, but yeah, when you have offices with doors, and especially offices with doors that are closed, I had an office with a door that closed because I was in the communications department. I was in charge, and people knew when my door was closed, it was not a good thing. There was something going on in there. And so, what are all of those things that are going on? And for some, the culture is, hey, they go out on a Friday evening, but if they're not the person that goes out on the Friday evening, that doesn't mean they're not a good fit. Maybe it means they have something on Friday evenings. And so there's all of those things, but it's very much about just watching and seeing what's going on.
For sure. No, I completely agree with you. For leaders who don't think that culture is important to them or important to their organizations, I would suggest that they just really don't have their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the organization.
Right. And they're only concerned with what's going to, how much money are we going to make this month, this year, this whatever. We were chatting a little bit before about my home football team, which is University of Colorado, and Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, who doesn't believe culture is important. And I think it's really showing in the fact that those kids don't always play well together.
Yeah, I love Prime, but for leaders who say they don't think it's important, they just that just points to they don't really understand what it is, because every organization has a culture. Every group of people, if three or more are gathered, there is a culture that exists. Now, they may not understand what it is, but there is a culture that exists there, and it's comprised of how they treat each other, how they speak to each other, what they value, what they devalue, and so it exists. And for leaders who kind of come from the world of Coach Prime, I would suggest that you're leaving real money on the table, and not just Jeff Standridge suggesting that. The data proves it out as well. You're leaving profits on the table. You're leaving customer satisfaction on the table. You're leaving revenue growth on the table. You're leaving employee retention on the table. If you're not positively engaged in trying to grow or define and standardize the culture of your organization.
I love it. Well, oh my gosh, we're at the top of the hour, and this has been so much fun and so informative. And I would love to have you on again because I think we're going to see some more shifts that are taking place.
Sure.
And some things like that. But tell us a little bit more. I mean, we mentioned you've got your fingers in lots of different pies.
Yeah.
How do people find you, and
Sure.
what are the services and things that you provide?
Sure. The best way to find me is I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So Jeff Standridge is my handle there,
Mhm.
or jeffstandridge.com or innovationjunkie.com. Those are the two websites where I'm most likely found, innovationjunkie.com or jeffstandridge.com. And my email is jeffs@innovationjunkie.com. Services that we provide is we start with where our clients are. We have clients who come to us and say, I want to figure out how to grow my business more rapidly. And so we start with a growth DX, and we use that to actually build a plan of attack and a strategic growth and implement a strategic growth system. Sometimes I just have CEOs who call me or other C-suite executives in the company and say, look, I just need a growth coach. I need someone, I'm trying to transform this area and I need some help with that. And so we're happy to help there. You said it in my bio: innovation, strategy, profit growth, organizational transformation, and leadership. Those are kind of the areas where we spend the vast majority of our time.
I love it. I love it. Well, this really has been just such a great discussion, and one that I think has to continue happening. I mean, that really is the thing, because it's not, we fixed the culture. No. In that little period of time, yes, but then things change.
Sure.
And so it's something that you just always have to be monitoring and watching. So yeah, I look forward to when we chat again. Until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Yeah, I know I've harped on culture quite a lot, but one of the ones that I say, and I said it earlier in the podcast, strong positive cultures have been correlated with every measure of business performance within organizations, from revenue and profit to customers and employees. And if you're not actively managing your culture, you're literally leaving shareholder value on the table.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having such a great discussion with Dr. Jeff Standridge. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.